Do you ever feel completely overwhelmed when you're faced with a complex problem? Well, I hope to change that in less than 3 minutes. So I hope to convince you that complex doesn't always equal complicated. So for me, a well-crafted bagway, fresh out of the oven, is complex, but a curry, onion, green, olive, poppy cheese bread is complicated. So a person can be an ecologist and he studies complexity, and he loves complexity, and he studies that in the natural world with the interconnectedness of species. And one ecologist said, and he showed a footweb or a map of feeding links between species that live in the alpine lakes in the mountains of California. And something happens to that food web when it is stocked with non-native fish that never lived before. All the grayed out species disappear. Some are actually on the brink of extinction, and lakes with fish have more mosquitoes even though they eat them. These effects were all unanticipated, and yet the ecologist was discovering that it is predictable. So what what I want to share with you with that example is some of key insights about complexity, where studying nature can be used to solve other problems. First is the simple power of good visualization. Tools to help untangle complexity and just encourage you to ask questions you didn't think of before. For example, you could plot the flow of carbon through corporate supply chains in a corporate ecosystem, or the interconnections of habitat patches for endangered species in the Yosemite National Park. The next thing is that if you want to predict the effect of one species on another, if you focus only on that link, then you black box the rest. It's actually less predictable than if you step back, consider the entire system, all the species, all the links, and from that place, hone in on the sphere of influence that matters the most. And scientists are discovering that with our research, that's often very local to the node that you care about within 1 or 2 degrees. So the more you step back, embrace complexity, the better chance you have of finding simple answers. And it's often different than the simple answer that you started with. So now let's switch gears and look at a really complex problem courtesy of the U.S. government. Let's say there is a diagram of the U.S. counterinsurgency strategy in Afghanistan. So there was a picture of it in the front page of New York Times a couple of years ago, instantly ridiculed by the media for being so crazy complicated. And the stated goal was to increase popular support for the Afghan government. Clearly a complex problem, but is it complicated? Well, when I first saw this in the front page of Times, I thought, great, finally something I can relate to. I can sink my teeth into this. So let's do this. Here we go. For the first time ever, a world premiere view of a spaghetti diagram as an ordered network. So the circled node in this can be the ones we are trying to influence, which is which is popular support for the government. That is the central node. And so now we can look 1 degrees, 2 degrees, 3 degrees away from that node and eliminate 3 quarters of that diagram outside that sphere of influence. Within that sphere, most of these nodes are actually actionable, like the harshness of the terrain, and a very small minority are actual military actions. Most are non-violent, and they fall into two broad categories: active engagement with ethnic rivalries and religious beliefs, and fair, transparent economic developments and provisioning of services. I don't know about this, but this is what I can decipher from this from this diagram that I saw in 21 seconds. When you see complex things like this, just don't be afraid. Kind of get excited, where you can be relieved because simple answers may emerge. And ecologists are discovering in nature that simplicity often lies on the other side of complexity. So, for any problem, the more you can zoom out, embrace the complexity, take a central node, focus on its sub nodes, and and handle each subnode separately, and you will have a better chance of finding the problem. So for any problem, the more you can zoom out and embrace that complexity, the better chance you have of zooming in on the simple details that actually matter the most.